Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is LaToria, and we are here for another edition of Soul Care Sessions. I am here with Miss Abdi Zelaya. Say hi to the people.
Hello, everyone.
Yes. And we are here in the month of December. FCA is just presenting these conversations to offer to you ladies as something special specifically for you. So today on the table, we're going to be talking about just the topic of grief and trauma, and really getting some definitions and some terminology around what, to some degree, I'm sure all of us are feeling and experiencing. So we're going to start. Abdi, just tell us a little bit about yourself, girl. Who are you? What do you do?
Yes. So, hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for allowing me to do this with you. Latoria, I'm really excited to be able
Yes.
to talk about things that I'm passionate about. So, like Latoria said, my name is Abdi Zelaya. I am a licensed professional counselor associate, and I'm supervised by Tiffany Ashenfelter. I work in a private practice under an awesome team of therapists. We the practice is Aspen House Associates. We're located in Richardson, Texas. I work with trauma, and I'm an EMDR trained therapist. So I love that we are able to kind of just bring healing for individuals that are needing it. And I'm also bilingual. So just kind of working with my, Latinx community and my Spanish speaking clients, or just like Latinos in general. My heart really goes to them in this community because that's who I am. And just knowing kind of like, hey, this has come up for me. I wonder if it also has affected a lot of people. So I am a pastor's kid. So I grew up in ministry. I, was in the mission field, all that stuff. So just having that insight into, your faith and mental health and finding that integration, I love, and I love that I get to do that for people. So that's a little bit about me.
That's so dope. That's so dope. Like you, people like you, women like you are so needed in these times. I think that we're arriving at a time in history where I think culturally, I can say, for people of color in general, therapy and counseling typically hasn't necessarily been the most popular tool or, approach to dealing with life's issues. And so I think the work that you do is also ministry. And I'm excited just for these women to be exposed to the blessing of the work that you do, and what you offer, bringing your skills to the table to engage people, minister to people, and help people get through their life, because it's rough out here.
No, I totally get it.
So, okay, we're going to start just with kind of talking about trauma and grief. And I know you said that's kind of your area. So can you help us understand the difference between trauma and grief?
Yeah. So, as I'm like thinking about what's the best way to explain it,
Sure.
because, I can give you this long, elaborate definition of what it is, but you're like, but what does it mean?
Right.
So how I see it is, trauma is more of an experience or an event that you have experienced that has affected how you either like perceive the world, or has affected so many different areas in your life. So that's why they say like, oh, that's traumatic, because it has ultimately affected the way that your brain processes it, or that it just affects your brain. So you can see it, and it comes up emotionally, mentally, physically, psychologically. So that's more of like that event that was so impactful in your life that is starting to come up in other areas of your life. And with grief, it's more of you've experienced a loss. So grief and loss, there are emotions that come out of grief. So, there's sadness and anger and, sometimes hopelessness. And with grief, you also tie it with the mourning. And that's more of like the action part of it. So mourning would be like the crying and like the rage and like just behaviors. So
Sure.
they go together. So it's more of you've experienced a loss, and your body, your emotions are trying to like process it. So they're coming up for you. And in this day and age, we are experiencing a lot of losses. So
Yes.
that grief is going to start to come up. I was actually talking to one of my colleagues, but she specializes in grief, and she said, grief will find you. You can try to, press it down and turn down the volume as much as you want, but it will come and get you. It will come and find you. So, our job as professionals is like, let's just sit in that grief and allow it to find you and process it. So that's
yes, indeed. It's a healthier approach, right, than trying to suppress it. Man. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, just as far as all of us kind of experiencing trauma and grief in this season of crazy 2020 and all that that it's brought with it. So like, what would your take be on like collective grief? What do you feel like that would look like, or some examples of that would be?
Yeah, I think when I think of like my clients and what I've seen them experience when it comes to culture and just, for example, with COVID and how that has affected how we do life. For me personally, as a Latina, I grew up with community and like the touchy-feely and always together, and you're doing the sobremesa and you're just in community, and there's like this affection that it just comes and it's part of your culture. And all of that is tied into this loss that we are experiencing. As Latinos, we can't go and sit at a party, at a quinceañera, at all of this stuff, and it looks different, and experiencing that loss of like even physical touch, or how we greet each other with like the kiss in the cheek.
So
all of these things, as a community that we are experiencing, this loss of who we are and how we do things. I think we kind of just brush it to the side, but kind of sitting in it and be like, actually, you know what? We're not able to explore or be part of this cultural aspect of who we are, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. Wow. That's such a good like take on it. I never thought about it. I mean, of course, I'm not Latina, but just hearing that perspective, man, it gives a lot of insight. What about like symbolic losses? Like, what do you feel like, and maybe that kind of ties into what you just said, but what would be the process of or how would you process those kinds of things? I mean, I kind of think about like, for the young ladies on this are listening to this session that maybe are students and they had prom coming up, and it's just like, those big monumental, or even like the quinceañera, like you were saying, like those moments that you kind of they're staples in your life. Like, how do you process those kinds of things?
Yeah. So whether it's, the symbolic type of loss that you've experienced, or the loss of a loved one, just kind of labeling it and identifying it. And it actually makes me even think of, as athletes, like what things have you lost that you cannot do because COVID, because 2020, and those important, aspects and factors of who you are, and identifying. I think that's the first thing, of like identifying it and labeling it, of like, I have lost the ability to celebrate my 15th birthday, or to celebrate, the representation of me becoming a woman, or as an athlete, I have lost the ability to have people celebrate with me when I'm at a game. And, when we win, I can't invite everybody because it's limited people that can actually be at the games, and just kind of identifying and putting a name to it. And that's the first step of, what that process would look like. And once you've identifying it and just kind of sitting with it and say like, I loved being able to be celebrated, or I loved the ability to have community with my family or with my friends or my teammates. And then that just kind of sitting with those feelings and identifying it. We sometimes we expect like, oh, there should be this like big elaborate like plan on how to get over grief, but really sometimes it's just naming it and just sitting with it, of like, I have lost this, and I'm sad because I loved being able to be around people, and I cannot do that anymore. And you just sit with it. So and whether it's like the loss of a celebrity, I think about, these celebrities that have passed away recently, and just identifying, I'm grieving the fact that this celebrity that represented, for example, you know, with the Black community, like hope, or it was a representation of who we are as people. So identifying like, I have lost this, even though you might have not known them personally, but it's still a loss that you experienced, and being able to name it and just identifying it and sitting with your feelings in that area.
It's so it's so simple sounding. You know, to your point, I think we do think it's just this profound process and things that you have to do, and it's just like, no, naming it and sitting with it. Like, how do you feel on the other side when you don't name those things and sit with them and you kind of suppress it? I mean, I know as women of color, a lot of times our thing is like, you get over it. You gotta strap it on your back and go to the next thing. You don't have time to cry. You don't have time to feel. You got to take care of the kids. You got to deal with your husband. You got to go to work. You got to do all the things. Like, how do those things manifest, you know, within us and within our body, and how do they affect specifically women and young ladies who may still be developing when we suppress and we don't deal with the grief or the trauma?
Absolutely. There's so many things are coming to my mind right now when it comes to that, because it's so important to be able to just sit with it and process it. And I think also for me personally, when I think of how I grew up, even in a Christian home, as Latinos or as people of color, you're like, you don't talk about your feelings? Oh, you better not be crying. Like, I'll give you a reason to cry. So
wait, y'all say that too?
Yes.
Didn't
like,
know that.
They'll take out the chancla and they'll be like, I'll give you a reason to cry.
Not
like,
the chancla, that's hilarious.
Yes. So, you know, we are told at a very young age, like, you cannot show your emotions. You cannot feel. That is not good. So you grow up with this and you just learn how to suppress. And I think it's not funny, but I love when I get, like, for example, a Latino sitting in front of me and I'm like, so what are you feeling? And they're like, nothing. And I'm like, okay, we're going to go in there. We're going to go.
Right.
And the moment that they feel things, it's like, this is a real thing. And I'm like, yeah, your body is asking you, like, I need a release. So it comes up in so many other areas. Like, very interestingly, there's this, what they call ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And there have been studies, like, with the medical field of how these adverse childhood experiences, whether it's trauma, and how a child has grown up, how it affects their physical body, because, like, their cortisol levels are, like, off, and how all these negative experiences affect your physical body. So when you see that, I'm like, wow, science backs it up, of, like, how important it is to, like, be able to take that care of that part of our bodies. And when you just suppress things, it's going to come up some other way. You know, for women, I think of some of the colleagues that I have, they're passionate about working with women that have like pain and like their pelvic floor, because when you think about when you're tense and you're scared, your whole body tenses up. So then that shows up later in life, or it shows up in other areas, and, you know, either with your anxiety or just other symptoms, it's going to look different for everyone. So it's kind of hard to say, like, oh, this is what it's going to look like, and if you have this sickness, it's because you're suppressing your feelings. No. When I'm not a medical professional, it's going to look different for everyone. But it's so important to be able to allow yourself and give yourself permission to just sit with it. And it's going to get messy. One of the examples I always give my clients is, it's like if you have a Coke bottle and you shake it and then you open it and then you close the lid because you're like, oh no, that's too messy and we're not going to go there. But sometimes you just need to open it and let it be messy and let it just pour out, because it needs that release. So our bodies are asking for that release. I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Body Keeps a Score. It's by Bessel van der Kolk, and it basically talks about how traumas and how experiences basically keep a score in your body, and how it really does affect your physical, you know, your physiological side of your life. And that's why I'm like, it's so important to be able to just allow yourself, because it's going to come up in so many other areas.
Man, so what are some ways that these ladies can implement, like self-care, or you know, what are some ways that they can, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, like, coping mechanisms or ways that they can, set themselves up to, in a healthy way, release
Yeah.
and let it be messy? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. A lot of times when I'm sitting with clients, I'm like, hey, we're all different, so it's going to look different for everyone. I
Sure.
can, show you this, but you might be like, well, I don't like to journal and I don't like to read. I don't want to do that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I always, uh, I always like kind of just start with allowing yourself to feel. And sometimes that takes time and learning on your part on how do I feel? Because I can say like, yeah, just sit with your feelings. Well, how do I sit with my feelings? So
Yeah.
what I will do is, we'll talk about, an emotional or an experience that has been emotional for that client. And I'll say like, well, what are you feeling right now? What's that emotion? And they might say like anger or anxiety. And then I'll say, okay, close your eyes. And I want you to do a full body scan. And I'd be like, where do you feel that? Where does that emotion live in your body? And then when you kind of just like allow yourself to just kind of like stepping back and like scanning your body, and you'll say like, I feel it in my chest, or I feel it in my stomach. And okay, what does that look like? It's like a stabbing, pain, or it's like a heaviness. Now my breathing, and just allowing yourself to identify how it show up for you. And when you kind of have that, guide of, this is how it looks like for me, this is how it shows up, so now let's take care of that. So figuring out what type of self-care things work for you. I can say, go take a bubble bath and relax. But some people might say, no, that stresses me out, because then I'm thinking about like, oh, the kids are outside and this and that. Okay, so then do something for you. I'll have some that say like, I just want to go to the store and buy one thing for myself without worrying that I have to buy something for someone else. Okay, then do that. That's the way that you do that self-care for yourself, and allowing yourself to treat you without any guilt. I think as women, as Latinas, you're always like, at least for me, I'm always trying to like care for everyone else. Like, oh, but if I do this, it's going to affect this person. But put yourself first. I think that's the first step of like, you are important too, and you matter.
Amen.
And you can do this for yourself. And it doesn't mean that you are gonna neglect your responsibilities, or it doesn't mean that you're being selfish. It just means that you are taking care of yourself. Just like when you're in an airplane, they tell you put your mask on first and then you put it on others. It's important to be able to do that for yourself. So self-care can look different. For me, self-care looks like being intentional with doing things that are uncomfortable, like working out. Because I do not like to wake up at like 5:30 in the morning, but I know that my body needs that I need the endorphins, I need the serotonin, like, because if not, it's going to affect me later in the day. So be intentional with making certain sacrifices, like waking up earlier, or making a sacrifice of saying no to a relationship that is probably not good for us. Saying no and setting boundaries with our family of like, this is overwhelming and you're asking a lot of me and I need to take care of myself, so I'm going to say no. And that's a form of self-care. So just kind of finding the balance and figuring out what works for me.
Wow. That's so good. Would you say that, I guess, tying into that question of, because I've definitely partaken in counseling, I recommend it to everyone out there. But one of the things that my counselor said to me was, you have to be intentional to be gentle with yourself. What would you say that looks like? Because again, like you're saying, it's different for everyone.
Yeah. When I think of that word of like being gentle with yourself is, if the way that you treat yourself would be the same way that you treat someone else, or like if you notice like, oh, that would not do that with someone else, you probably need to be more gentle with yourself. What does that look like? Like, would you react or say certain things to a stranger or to a close friend that you say to yourself? And kind of having that like perspective of like, no, that would be mean. I would lose some friends. why do you say them to yourself?
Ooh.
You know? So just kind of like having that perspective of like, yeah, I have to be gentle. I have to be nice to myself because I matter. I'm important. It's so much easier to be mean or negative to ourselves without realizing like this is affecting me and I need
Wow.
to take care of that. And just to even tie with like the self-care, and you said counseling, that is a perfect way to do self-care. I have
Straight
some of my
up.
clients that are like, this is my time. This is how I do self-care because I need a safe space where I can just process and do my
Yes.
healing and do my work. And it doesn't mean that
Yes.
it's always going to be like relaxing candles and, sometimes it means you're going to have to do some hard work, like I
Yeah,
mentioned. So, yeah.
absolutely. Oh, that's such good insight. That's such good insight. So let me ask you this, like, what are some ways that you feel like faith plays a role in dealing with grief?
Yeah. And it goes back to like just sitting in your feelings. Uh,
Hmm.
for me personally, growing up in the church as a Latino, you don't feel things. You give
Yeah.
them to the Lord and you just
Yes.
like, He will take care of them, which He does. But I
Mhm.
think God is big enough to hold our feelings and our emotions. And
Yes.
He allows us to sometimes get additional support. Just like
Hmm.
if we get sick, we go to a doctor when our minds are probably needing some extra help, we can go to a professional.
Hmm.
And with tying with your faith of like, what does that look like? Can I have these feelings? Is it Christian like of me to feel anger, or does that mean that I'm not trusting God? Um, you know, because He's sovereign, He's, all of this stuff. And I just go back to the Bible. And for me, this part was so mind blowing of like, oh my goodness, I can feel things, and doesn't mean that I don't trust God. When we look at, the story of Jesus and Lazarus, and when he raised him from the dead, and it's the shortest verse, and it says Jesus wept.
Yes.
He chose to sit in his feelings,
Mm.
though he knew he was going to raise him from the dead, but he still chose to sit and to grieve and to weep.
Yeah.
I was like, if Jesus did it, that means that I can do it too. And it doesn't mean that he didn't trust God.
Right.
It just meant that he allowed himself to sit with it. And for me, that has been so powerful of like, my feelings, my emotions do not mean that I don't trust God. It
Hmm.
just means that I need to allow myself to process them as I'm trusting him, as I know that he's going to get me through it,
Yes.
whatever that looks like. So,
Girl, you preaching. That's so good. And it's so profound and so true. I think a lot of times we project our human limitations on God, and and the reality is like, no, He made us. Like,
mhm.
He's not moved by our biggest baddest day or in our darkest ugliest
Mhm.
season or space. He's God. Like, He already knew, He knows, He can handle wherever we find ourselves. You know what I mean? I think sometimes we can find ourselves being like hyper religious, and we've created these stipulations that don't exist.
Mhm.
And so it's so powerful. Just that simplicity of Jesus wept, man. Like, that's so good, Abby. That's so good.
That
Um,
ever since that, I was all
it's
like,
like
what? Yeah.
mind blowing, the simplicity of it. So okay, so I know that you talked about a few moments ago. You mentioned boundaries,
Mhm.
and I really would like for you just to tease that out just a little bit about the importance of boundaries when you are in a season like we're in,
Mhm.
dealing with grief.
Yeah, I think a lot of times boundaries are such like a ooh kind of subject, and people are like, I don't want to talk about that's because you feel guilty or you feel all of this stuff. I recently came across I think it was like on Instagram or something. I wish I remembered who said it, so I don't want to like quote and whoever that person was. But it was in the sense of boundaries are not walls that you put up. They're
Mm.
more of the doors that point people, like it's the door so people can come in. So setting a
Oh.
boundary doesn't mean like, no, you can't do that. It just means like, I'm choosing not to allow you to do that, but here's another alternative, or like, this is how you can do that, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes when you say like, I'm going to set this boundary, sometimes people like, oh, you know, they get offended or they feel bad, but it's really like, no, I'm not setting up this wall. I'm just telling you, this is the door that you can use. And I'm going to show you what that door looks like. That's what boundaries basically are. So I'm choosing not to do this. I'm choosing not to set these walls up for you, but you can do this instead. So for me personally, and I think as Latinos, like setting that boundary in your family or for yourself of, I know this is what has always been expected, but I'm going to choose to listen to my body or listen to myself and set this boundary and just set this door for you to approach it in a different way.
Wow, that's powerful. And it's empowering just to even hear you kind of tease that out and explain, because I think especially as women, to a certain extent, I think culture in general just teaches us that we're supposed to just kind of accept what people give us, or, you know, like we're just supposed to make do with whatever's thrown at us. And it's just like, no, who said that? Who said that? That's what the Bible surely don't say it. So
Yeah.
wow, that's empowering. As we wrap up, this has been such a good discussion. And I cannot wait for the next one. I'm literally over here like writing down notes like, oh, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this. What are some resources that, or at least one resource that you feel like you could share with these ladies that in the meantime, in between time until next month, they can check out?
Oh man, I'm trying to think of so many different things. I do want to say, you know, as the holidays are approaching, just learning how to sit with yourself and setting those boundaries, whatever it looks like, and giving yourself permission to set those boundaries, but also take care of yourself. And one of the things that I love to do with my clients, usually at the end of sessions, to kind of just like, okay, let's just listen to our bodies. Let's listen to like, what is it asking of us? And I would maybe like to kind of finish with that and just what it would look like to give yourself some time, whether it's removing yourself from relationships or situations, or saying like, hey, family, give me just, I need some moments by myself, for myself, and listening to my body. I guess that's what I would say, like maybe hold on to that resource of hope, of just grounding and listening to your body, listening to yourself, what you need. And what that looks like, and we can I'll kind of demonstrate what I normally say is, you know, you sit back and you just kind of relax and you allow yourself to like sink into your chair. And normally I will say like, okay, well, let's just close our eyes and let's be aware of our surroundings. What room are you in? Do you hear things? Like go through the five senses. You know, do you smell things? What do you taste? What do you hear? And then do that body scan from like the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, and identify like what physical feelings do you have, but also what emotions, and identifying like, hey, I'm feeling it here. So that's it might be my anxiety, or it might be sadness. And just like sitting with it and be like, wonder what that sadness is trying to tell us. Probably we're wanting to grieve this, or we've experienced a loss, or whatever that looks like, and just kind of sitting with it and allowing yourself to just be present and holding those emotions, those feelings, and then being aware of how your body holds it. So that's why I do that full body scan of like, okay, how do my shoulders feel? Oh, they're tense. Okay, well, let's relax them. And then just kind of move through the rest of your body. And most of the time at the end, they're like, oh, I could take a nap now. I feel so relaxed. So that's my challenge for, you know, these young ladies, these coaches, you know, take some time, whether it looks like 5 or 10 minutes, and do that. Kind of be present. If you need to go into the bathroom or the closet, somewhere away from distractions, and do that for yourself, and allow your body to even have that rest from that tension that you might be holding, if that makes sense.
Wow, that's so good. Thank you so much for that, Abdi. Man, I'm there's so many other things that I want to ask, but we're going to pause for now, and we'll pick back up next month. But in the meantime, how can we keep in contact with you on social media if there's someone that's listening and they're like, man, I really like what she said. I want to schedule some time. Like, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website for our practice is aspenhouseassociates.com, and it's house HAUS, not like house. aspenhouseassociates.com, and you could just put an inquiry if you're looking for therapy and just that self-care for your mental health. You can just reach me there. You can also, I do have an Instagram. I have a mental health Instagram, and it's just therapy by Abdi, so ABDI. And I try to just kind of put that out there for the community, and sometimes you just need a reminder of like, oh yeah, I do need to breathe, yeah. But yeah, you're more than welcome to follow me on there.
Oh man, okay. Well, I'm already following you, so I'm excited just to learn more from you and to hear more insight. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we definitely look forward to talking to you again. Ladies, if you guys have any questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, any of that kind of stuff, please email me. You can find me at latoriawilson@fca.org. This conversation is brought to you on behalf of FCA. Know that we are out here in the community. We're for you. We love you. And we wanted to create a space for you to come and just put some information in your ears and your heart and your mind so that you can listen, learn, and share. So until next time, we'll see y'all. Bye.
Bye.